Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the next installment of the Climb Fund Entrepreneurial Elevation Series, Business Plan Basics. Now, whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur with a brand new idea or a business owner looking to scale up, a well-crafted business plan is one of the most valuable tools you can have. A business plan serves as your roadmap to outlining your goals, strategies, and financial projections. It's also a critical document when seeking funding from investors or financial institutions. In this session, we'll walk through each section of the SBA's traditional business plan format, breaking it down into actionable steps that will help you create a clear and compelling plan. The process of writing a business plan can seem overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. By following a structured approach, you can transform your vision into a concrete, strategic document that not only helps you secure funding, but also helps keep you focused on your objectives. Throughout this lecture, we'll explore key components like the executive summary, market analysis, financial projections, and more. By the end, you'll have a solid understanding of how to craft a business plan that sets you up for long-term success. So without further ado, let's dive in. Now, the first thing we need to identify is what is a business plan and what is its purpose. And so the good thing about a business plan is that it is exactly what it sounds like. It outlines the company's mission, visions, objectives, and strategies for achieving success. And when properly done, a business plan should detail how to structure, run, and grow your business. Um, a business plan, when done properly, should be a roadmap um, to all the various avenues of business activity that your company is going to be running through. It should identify, your vendors. It should identify, your industry, your operational plan, anything internal to the organization. Um, all of the details should be covered in a business plan to let those who don't know what your business is know what your business is and how it operates internally. Um, and a business plan should also convince investors and potential partners that you're serious about your idea. Um, you know, Generally speaking, when, a business plan is needed, we're usually using it for attaining financing or attracting investors or things of that nature. That doesn't have to be its purpose. It can also be just a business plan that you are constantly planning out your business and the next steps that you plan to take and the next directions that you plan to move in. But, a lot of times, funding is a big part of why we make a business plan. And so one thing your business plan should absolutely do is explain your funding needs, and then the plan usage for those funds. And by analyzing market trends, competition, and potential challenges, a business plan helps in risk management and mitigation. Again, I'll use the word roadmap. We don't use them a whole lot anymore because now we have GPS that kind of directs us where to go. But 30, 40 years ago, we used road atlases to navigate around the country and the various roadways. And a road map is a very good analogy for a business plan. When you put together a business plan, when you are thorough about it, when you are very detailed about it, you're going to identify different risks, and they are probably going to be risks that you didn't really anticipate, because, you know, when we think about, you know, opening up a startup, or we thinking about, you know, taking our business to the next level, a lot of times we're thinking very large scale, about like industry and, who's our target market and things of that nature. But when we really start engaging with a business plan the way it's meant to be done, we start identifying little details that, if we weren't going through this exercise, we may not uncover these risks until we actually get there in our business operations. And it's much better to identify the risks up front and before you get started. That way you can have an actionable plan in place for those risks when you come across them. Um, but the business plan should also provide benchmarks for tracking progress and making necessary adjustments to stay on course. Um, you know, this is especially true if you are, um, if you have a detailed plan in place for growth for your business. And even if you don't have a detailed plan in place for your growth plan in place for your business, um, you know, the tracking of progress, whether that's through, financial statements like a profit and loss or balance sheet, or whether that's through, just tracking the expenses of your business, just tracking the revenue. We want to have benchmarks in place. Um, we want to have a set of data that we can compare how our business is currently performing to. You know, a good example of that is a break-even point. We know with a break-even point, what is the point in daily operations or um, uh, producing revenue that will get us to our point where we break even and cover all of our costs and expenses, and then whatever is beyond that is going to be profit. So benchmarking is something that should be in the business plan. We should kind of know what a good month looks like, what a bad month looks like, what a break-even point looks like, um, because all of this informs us about how our business is going to perform. And the biggest thing that you need to know about a business plan is that it is a research exercise. You do have to get out and do research, and the business plan is only as good as the research that you're putting into it. So, you know, it's going to inform you about your industry, about your competition, about the distribution networks, all of these things that we have to take into consideration for a business. We should be considering them in the planning phase, and um, that will give us the opportunity to come up with contingency plans to address any potential potholes or risks that we didn't encounter. And the business plan is the perfect opportunity to do that. Obviously, you can only account for so much when you're in the planning phase, and when you get the business started up, you're going to run into things that you weren't able to anticipate or uncover during the business plan. But when we do the business plan, we are able to minimize that, because we do get to take a detailed dive into how our business will perform, how we intend it to perform, and make adjustments and constantly keep improving efficiencies as the business grows, expands, and produces more as time goes on. So that's what a business plan is and what its purpose is. So now we want to, briefly go over what um, what what is included in a business plan. Um, and here at Climb Fund, we like to use the SBA traditional model for business plans. So, that's what we're going to be going over here today. If you want to see what an SBA business plan in the traditional model looks like, they have two examples on their website. Um, but in terms of what should be included in the business plan, the first thing that we should always have in the business plan is our executive summary. It should be the first couple of pages after your title page. And the executive summary should basically summarize the entire business plan in 1 to 2 pages. A lot of times, the folks who you're presenting your business plan to won't have time to sit down and read the entire 15, 20, 25 page document, however long you end up making it. And that's where the executive summary comes in. The executive summary is going to summarize the high points of it. It's going to drive the main points across that you're trying to get across. And basically just cover the most important sections in the entire business plan in a 1 to 2 page summary. Now, although the executive summary should be the first thing in your business plan after the title page, the executive summary should be the last thing that you actually create, because you can't create a summary of the business plan before you've created the business plan. So, every other section you should address first. And when you've got all of those completed, go back and do your executive summary and just do your best to sum up the entire business plan in 1 to 2 pages, for a more quickly digestible version of it for those who are not going to be able to sit down and read the entire document. Um, the next section in the business plan should be the company description. Um, After that, we're looking at market analysis, where we analyze the market that we're in, probably our competition, and things that fall under that category. It should also address your operational plans, the organization and the management of it. Um, Service and product line is something we all obviously need to address to let everybody know, what you provide, in terms of product and services. It should also have a marketing and sales plan. And towards the end, there should definitely be a place for your funding request and your financial projections. And then after that, we are going to have an appendix, if applicable, for any supporting documentation for your business plan. And that can be a variety of documents. But we're going to now cover each one of these sections, and take a brief look at what should be in each one of these sections of your business plan. So as we said, the executive summary should be the first couple pages in your business plan, and it should be the last thing that you do when you're creating your business plan. Um, and what the executive summary is ultimately supposed to do is provide a high-level overview. It gives a concise summary of the entire business plan, highlighting the key points. And as you do that, it should also capture the interest of the reader. It is often the first section that investors, lenders, or stakeholders read, so you need it to be compelling. And sometimes the executive summary is going to be the only section that the investors or lenders or stakeholders read. So you need to pay particular attention to the efficacy of your executive summary, because it does guide the readers. It sets the stage for the rest of the business plan. It's ensuring the clarity and focus. And we need the reader of the business plan to be able to clearly understand the plan and be able to digest it and critically think about it. And they can't do that if we don't do a good job of providing this high level overview. So the executive summary is something you want to pay particular attention to. You want to understand that this may be the only section that gets read. That doesn't mean you want to ignore the rest of the business plan. It just means that the executive summary needs to be highly polished and cover the high points of the business plan that you are trying to get across to the reader. Um, Now, additionally, as the business plan has various components to it, there are certain components that you want to be able to um, put into the executive summary. And so, what ideally we would like to see in the executive summary is a brief company description, your mission statement. You want to talk about your products and services. You want to talk about the competitive advantage that you have, because that is one thing that funders and stakeholders, they want to know what sets you apart from the competition in your industry. So competitive advantage is something that you want to make sure that you address, because the more likely someone is to see you as being different from your competitors, probably the more likely you are to get that funding, at least if being different and unique is considered a good thing. Um, and so we also want to talk about our market position. That is also very relative to your competition. Are you on the high end of the pricing scale, low end, mid range? Do you offer limited services in your industry or a full line of services? Just talking about where you stack up against your competition and what opportunities that market position presents you. Obviously, if we're looking to attain funding with a business plan, we really need to talk about the leadership and your team of employees, especially the key employees, and not necessarily just employees, but if you have advisors who have been guiding you, like CPAs or like a lawyer or a consultant, we want to mention them as well, because when you demonstrate to folks that you're working with professionals to try to become more proficient in your industry, that really speaks well to who you are as a business owner. And so we want to be sure that anybody who needs to know that information knows that information. And additionally, we also want to talk about the growth strategy. This can be a bit varied from business to business. Obviously startups, um, I think it's a bit too forward thinking for startups to be working on a growth strategy, right out the gate. I feel like startups need to be focused on attaining stability and surviving the first couple of years. And if you can do that and be profitable, I think that most small business owners, most startup owners would be very happy to survive the first couple of years and be profitable doing so. So you can certainly replace growth strategy if you're a startup, with what your goals are going to be for the first couple years of running the business. Now, if you're an existing business and you're creating a business plan for funding, absolutely, you need to be talking about your growth strategy. If you're looking for funding, that means you're likely trying to invest in some area of the business, whether that is in, more equipment, whether that's in more staffing and employees. Maybe you need another location. But whatever it is, we want to talk about what we're trying to achieve through the attainment of additional capital. So go into your growth strategy and fill in the blanks in the executive summary with regards to what it is that we're trying to accomplish through attaining more financing. Additionally, after we talk about the growth strategy and what we're trying to achieve, we need to talk about how much capital we're going to need and specifically what we're going to be using those funds on. Um, you know, Anytime you're going to borrow a large amount of money from whether it be a CDFI or a traditional lending institution, and it's business related, they're going to want to know, what are you doing with the money and what is the plan for the money? What are you going to spend it on? How much money you need? So we need to make sure we include this in the executive summary. It doesn't have to be all of the numbers, because we're going to put all of our numbers towards the end of the business plan, but we definitely want to make mention of, what is our funding request and what are we going to use those funds on. And finally, a call to action. You know, what what action do you want the reader to take next? Now, most of the time, if we're doing this for an outside audience, it's going to be funding related, and our call to action is going to be, you know, please provide us with funding so we can grow the business. So, you know, obviously we don't want to, you know, beat a dead horse with it, but we do want to say, hey, you know, we're confident in our business. We feel like if we have these additional items in place, we can attain this much growth over this period of time, and, you know, let that be your call to action. Um, and be sure that it wraps up the entire executive summary very neatly. Because, like I said, we want the executive summary to be as clear as we possibly can. Now, the next section after your executive summary is going to be your company description. And again, this is exactly what it sounds like. There's not a whole lot of mystery behind a company description. Um, you know, the things that we want to talk about are: what problems do your business solve? Who is your target market? Are your competitive advantages? You know, talk about where your business is going to be located, how big you plan on, how big of a staff you plan on hiring, the various positions that you're going to have. You want to talk about the strengths of the organization. You want to try to hammer those points home as much as you can, um, just so the reader is very well versed on what are the bright points of your company. Um, and then again, I know we touched on this a little bit in the executive summary, but um, in any business, a very relevant question is always what differentiates your company from your competitors. Um, you know, that's something that lenders want to understand and feel confident in. So we want to present that idea in the best light possible. And so at the end of your company description, you know, the reader should know, you know, what industry you're in and who is your target market, what problems are your business going to solve, where the business is located, these type things. You want them to come away from the company description with a good general idea of what your business provides, who it provides it to, where it provides it at, things along those lines. And that's basically all we need to accomplish in a company description. So now let's take a look at the market analysis. Um, when we say market analysis, um, we are talking about the specific market that you're in. So maybe, you know, if your business is, you know, a restaurant that sells hamburgers. So you are in the food and beverage industry. And we want to take a look at the various factors around food and beverage as an industry. We want to know, you know, who are your competitors? We want to know the general characteristics of the industry. We want to identify any trends that have been taking place in the industry. A good example of that, you know, to stick with our hamburger restaurant, um, you know, over the past 15 years or so, we've seen, especially in the fast food industry, we've seen them trending towards a more healthy menu. So that would be a trend that you would want to identify in that industry. Um, and additionally, a very important question with regards to market analysis is, where is the industry headed? Is the industry in a growth stage or is it in a decline stage? This can be very important if you are making decisions about whether or not to give a business funding. Um, you know, an example here would be, let's say you're trying to decide whether or not to give a business funding, and you know, the products and services that this industry sells, is in decline. Like maybe they sell CDs, or maybe they sell USB drives. USB drives, if they're not completely in decline right now, they're at least on the backside of their product life cycle, because we know these days everything is moving to cloud-based storage. So you may be hesitant to lend to a company who is creating USB drives because the market for those is beginning to dry up. And lastly, what is the market size when we're talking about the industry? Are you talking a large market, or a niche target? Um, you know, I think um, a good example of this would be, maybe you're going to open up a nursery, a plant nursery. Now, is your plant nursery going to be all inclusive? Is it going to have shrubs and trees and uh, mosses, or maybe your plant nursery is only going to focus on succulents? Um, this is the type of differentiation we're talking about with regards to market size. Are you going into a very slim segment of the market, or are you trying to attack the market at large, in a very broad way? Next, in our market analysis, we do want to identify our target market. Um, this is pretty straightforward stuff with regards to demographics. We want to look at the age, gender, income, education, etc. Um, in terms of psychographics, we're looking at the consumer's interests, what type of lifestyle that they live, what type of values do they have, and what are their pain points. Pain points, a very good example of a pain point can be price. Some people are not going to pay a premium price, um, while others have no problem paying a premium price for a product. Um, Additionally, we also want to look at behavioral factors. Behavioral factors include things like buying habits, brand loyalty, the decision-making process. And lastly, we take a look at geographic segmentation, in terms of our local and very specific markets. So, you know, and a good example of that would be here in Charleston. We have Charleston County, and we also have the city of Charleston, and then we have downtown Charleston. So, do you want your business to be strictly in downtown Charleston? Are you trying to serve the entire city of Charleston, or maybe you're trying to serve all of Charleston County? So these are the various factors we want to discuss and identify when we're talking about our target market. And that will wrap up our market analysis pretty neatly. Now, additionally, with market analysis, there are things that startups have difficulty overcoming to break in to the market. And these things are called entry barriers. Generally speaking, the biggest entry barrier for most startups is the cost in attaining financing to get the business off the ground. But sometimes competition is an entry barrier. When competition is so high that it's going to cost you a fortune just to break into the market, sometimes that's a sign that we need to rethink things or come up with a more innovative approach. Technology can also be another entry barrier. And a lot of times, technology goes hand in hand with our startup costs because, if we need a certain technology to get our business off the ground, that's something that we're going to have to come up with funding for. Um, a good example would be if you have a business idea, and that business idea is going to require you to have an app created. um, you know, that's going to be an entry barrier. And it's going to be, technological, and it's also going to be cost related. Um, so we want to be sure that we address these things. Regulations, you always want to be familiar with the regulatory environment in the industry that you're getting into. So if there are regulations that create very high costs, you want to be sure that you point them out in your business plan, because we don't want it to be mistaken for something that you have control over. Um, if regulations are forcing you to spend X amount of dollars for this purpose, and that is a burden on the business, it's a good idea to address that in our business plan, and just make sure that that information is available to our reader. Um, Customer loyalty, you might not think of that as an entry barrier, but um, when you open up a startup and you're getting set to do business for your first month, your first 6 months, your first year, you're really going to be trying to take customers away from other business entities. And sometimes customers can be really, really loyal, and that can be a problem when you're trying to break into an industry and attain new clients. Um, so we want to address that aspect. Distribution networks are a big barrier. Product and service logistics can be something that uh, creates problems for businesses, whether it's, back during COVID when so many products got, we had factories shut down, products, we ran out of supply. And these are the type of distribution network challenges that we're talking about. Now, COVID is an extreme example, um, but um, there are a lot of different things that distribution networks can be affected by. And if you see that your business is at risk to being affected by that, it's something you want to mention in the business plan. And again, startup costs and capital requirements, these are going to be, pretty similar. Um, you know, you have to have capital to start a business, and generally speaking, that is where most most startups run into issues first, is attaining that capital. So um, barriers of entry, definitely something we want to cover, if it's something that is going to present issues for you and your business. Again, competitive analysis is something that is very direct. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's an analysis of your competitors in your given industry. And so what we want to do here is identify direct and indirect competitors. So an easy example to differentiate direct and indirect competitors. Pepsi and Coke are direct competitors. They have a very similar product who they target the same audiences. Pepsi and Coke are direct competitors. However, bottled water and Pepsi are not direct competitors. Yes, um, they're both beverages, but they are usually marketed very differently, and the target market is usually going to be a bit different. Maybe instead of water, we talk about Gatorade. Gatorade is a completely different beverage than Coke or Pepsi. They have different target markets. So Gatorade and Coke, or Gatorade and Pepsi, would be indirect competitors. We also want to compare our business to our competitors in terms of pricing, product quality, customer service, and unique selling points. These are the differentiators. These are what set our business apart, or, potentially make our business similar to our competition. Um, you know, and that's one of the things that a business plan can really help you with. In terms of looking at your competition, sometimes, we have competitors who are doing things right, and we want to try to emulate what they're doing. In other circumstances, We don't want to seem at all like our competitors. We want to differentiate ourselves as much as possible. So we need to talk about both sides of that equation. Um, what competitors are doing well, what they're not doing so well, and what we're going to do to be different than them, and potentially take market share away from them. Now, your competitive analysis should also include a SWOT analysis. So a SWOT analysis is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And a SWOT analysis is meant to assess your competitive position. Strengths and weaknesses are things that are internal to your organization, whereas opportunities and threats are things that are external to your organization. And so when we do our SWOT analysis, we want to keep that in mind. And we want to address each one of these strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats as thoroughly as possible. Um, because, we don't want our reader of our business plan to be able to identify weaknesses or threats um, on their own. We want them to read the business plan and read about the weaknesses and the threats, or the strengths and the opportunities. We want to let them know that we have been forward thinking, that we understand what these weaknesses and threats are, and that we have plans in place to address them if they become an issue. Um, Additionally, we want to detail your pricing strategy and how it compares to the competitors. Pricing is a very big differentiator in the market, no matter what industry it is. I think for the average customer, price is one of the most important considerations when purchasing or deciding who you're going to do business with. Everybody has limited funds. And so we need to really pinpoint where we stand in the market with regards to pricing, and how we compare to all of our competitors with regards to pricing. And lastly, we want to explain where your business fits into the market. Whether you're on the luxury side, on the budget friendly side, if you're more of an innovator, or if you're in a niche section. Um, we just we want to really hammer home the point of where we stand with regards to our target, with regards to our competition. And that way the the reader or the lender or whoever you're directing your business plan to has a good idea of where you stack up in the market and with regards to your competition. The SWOT analysis, we want to, break it down just a little bit more here for you guys. Um, so when we're talking about strengths, some things that we're considering are unique selling points, strong brand reputation, skilled workforce or leadership, proprietary technology or patents, strong financial position, loyal customer base, efficient supply chains or operations. These are things that we really want to talk up. We want our business to be seen in the best light possible. So all of our strengths, we want to be absolutely sure that we identify them. Um, we don't want to over embellish them, but we want the reader to have a clear understanding of our strong points. Now, our weaknesses, we do also want to identify, but one thing about the weaknesses is we need to identify not only the weaknesses, but potential solutions to these weaknesses. Um, and these can include things like limited resources or funding, which, let's be honest, every organization has limited resources. So that's going to be something that every organization, large or small, talks about. Poor brand recognition, that's something that many startups struggle with, because they just don't have a history of doing business, and you're trying to gain foothold in the market. Um, skill gaps in your workforce. Again, that's something that startups struggle with because it's easy for um, you know businesses that are more established to offer more competitive salary and benefits packages. Startups generally have a more difficult time with that, which means they are forced to target lower skilled employees, and sometimes that can, be a weakness to our organization. Um, High operational costs are another one, inefficient processes or outdated technology, customer service or product quality issues, and a weak online presence or marketing presence. And again, um, we want to identify our weaknesses and let the reader know about them. But whatever we talk about with regards to weaknesses, we also need to somewhere, some way, somehow address our contingency plan for those weaknesses and how we're going to address them if they become a problem. Opportunities, again, this is something that we want the reader to understand where we are with regards to um, the potential upside of our business moving forward. And so some opportunities that we can identify are emerging market trends. Right now, I think it's safe to say that um, we are across many industries, we're seeing a trend towards a more convenience-based service delivery or product delivery. Um, you know, Things like DoorDash and things along those lines. We see people not wanting to get out and very much are willing to pay for their products or services to be delivered to them at home. So that's an emerging market trend that may be an opportunity for your business. Um, Changes in consumer preferences. Again, that's similar to marketing trends, but there's a little bit of a difference there. Inflation hits, consumer preferences becomes lower price products because now we're paying premium prices for the same product. So sometimes we're going to search out a cheaper product or service. Technological advancements are absolutely an opportunity. A good example of that is, the various ways apps are being created to deliver products and services, making products and services much more available to a wider audience. Um, Expansion opportunities and partnerships, maybe, um, you've had competitors close down and there's market share available. Maybe you're gonna buy out a partner or a competitor. Any type of expansion opportunity that you see, again, we want to make sure um, the the target reader is going to be aware of these things. Another opportunity would be favorable government policies or tax incentives. Over the past 10 years, we've seen a lot of government policies and incentives geared towards, green technology, solar panels, electric cars, things of that line. Um, and lastly, competitor weaknesses or gaps in the market, and those are consistent across all industries, or at least a large majority of the industries. Um, you know, there's always going to be some type of gap in the market, and that is a gap in the market is an opportunity for a new entrant. Be sure to identify those as well. Lastly, we want to take a look at threats. These are pretty self-explanatory. Economic downturns or recessions are always a threat. Increased competition is always a threat. The regulatory or compliance changes, again, that's something that's always going to be a threat. Changes in customer behavior and market saturation. We are seeing the way products and services get delivered across our society change pretty quickly over the past 5 years. Um, as I said earlier, to a more convenience-based model. People are willing to pay more for that convenience. So that is certainly a behavior that has been changing with regards to consumers. Supply chain disruptions are always going to be there. We saw that during COVID. Products just not on shelves because they weren't being produced, and that was a big disruption. It caused scarcity and ended up shutting down a lot of businesses. So supply chain disruptions are something that we need to talk about, and we really want to have a backup plan for if possible. And lastly, cybersecurity risk or data breaches. As we move into a more technological society, these are always going to be risks that every business um, encounters. So it's something that we need to address and at least talk about how we're going to keep our data secure if you are in a data intensive industry. So here is a SWOT analysis that I created to just give you guys an opportunity of what one would look like. This is for a business called Coffee Haven. Some strengths that they have are high quality, locally sourced coffee beans, a cozy ambiance with free Wi-Fi, attracting remote workers and students, a strong community presence and loyal customer base, skilled baristas who create personalized drinks and experiences. So we can see how all of these factors would be strengths for Coffee Haven and why we would want to talk about them in our business plan. Weaknesses would be things like limited seating capacity during peak hours, higher prices compared to nearby coffee chain shops, dependence on a single supplier for coffee beans, and inconsistent social media presence. Again, these negatives, um, we want to be sure that at other places, the appropriate places in the business plan, that we are mentioning contingency plans for these weaknesses. If you are running Coffee Haven and you know that you are dependent on a single supplier for your coffee beans, um, you want to let investors know that you are currently working to expand your network of suppliers, because you never want to be completely dependent upon one supplier. That creates a lot of risk, it creates weaknesses, and it creates a threat. So, that's an example of how we would address one of our weaknesses. Opportunities for Coffee Haven, we would be looking at expanding delivery services throughout partnerships with food delivery apps, hosting events or live music to attract one or more customers, introducing a loyalty program to increase repeat business, offering seasonal drinks and merchandise to boost sales. These are, pretty standard for a coffee shop in today's um, business environment. And the threats that Coffee Haven would be facing would be rising coffee bean prices due to supply chain disruptions. We've already talked about supply chain disruptions and um, how they pose threats to businesses. Again, increased competition for new coffee shops and large chains. Large chains tend to present a bigger threat to our small coffee shops just because of the scale. It's definitely harder for a small coffee shop to compete with a company like Starbucks or something like that. Changing consumer habits like preference for at-home brewing. These are all threats that most businesses are going to face. And so we just want to be sure that we identify these threats and that we have a plan in place to address them and if and when they show up. With regards to organization and management, we really want to let the reader know what our daily operations are going to look like, what our company structure looks like, and how things are going to work on a day-to-day basis. One of the most important things that fall under organization and management is what type of legal structure your company is. These days, a large percentage tend to go with an LLC, but that's not always the case. So, maybe we want to talk about which organizational structure we have and why we chose that. And if you have plans to change that in the future, you might also want to address that. With regards to operations, you know, hours of operations, will you have employees? If so, how many? What are your employees' responsibilities? What are their salaries and benefits? What equipment will you need? What materials? What resources? These are all things that go under your operational plan. With regards to management, what are the owner's responsibilities? Will the owner be involved in day-to-day operations, or is the owner just going to be an owner who is more hands-off? Um, who are your employees and what are their qualifications? We definitely want to talk about how big of a staff we're going to have, what type of education level they need, things along those lines. If we have enough employees to where we need to have an organizational flow chart, which like a chain of command, we definitely want to show that. And again, like I said earlier, any lawyers, accountants, advisors, consultants that you're working with, we want to be sure that we talk about that as well. It always it always paints a business owner in a better light when you can demonstrate that you're working with professionals to take your business to the next level. So we always want to talk about that. Um, Again, we want to talk about our services and our product lines. Let the reader know, what are you selling? Why is it needed? What unique benefits does your service or product offer? How is your product priced relative to the competition? How does your product perform relative to the market competition? Do you own any patents, copyrights, or trademarks? And does your product or service require specific machinery or technology? Um, you know, what what your organization offers in terms of product or services is really where the value comes from, the need that you're filling. And so this may be one of our more expansive parts of the business plan. We need to tell what it is that we hope to accomplish and why it's needed, and we need to describe this well. Um, so this seems like something that's really simple, with regards to describing our products and services, but it is something that we need to do really accurately and really well, and paint our products and services in the best light possible. Marketing and sales, this is really where, for a lot of organizations, the rubber meets the road, especially when you're talking about a startup. Startups start out relatively unknown, and through marketing practices, you get the word out, you let people know what you're offering. Um, and generally, that's going to begin with the 4 P's of marketing. So the product, what are you selling and what makes it special? The place, brick and mortar, online, mobile, distribution networks, what kind of physical location are you going to have, or are you going to be a home-based business? Are you delivering products and services all day long? Just talk about that and let them know, um, where your business is going to be located and how it's going to fill the needs in the market. Price is something that's always very relevant with regards to marketing. Where are you positioned amongst the competition? And if you'll notice, that's something that we talked about earlier. And quite a few things that we've talked about have been talked about in more than one place in our lecture. So, all of these things don't have to be in one place only. They can be in multiple places. But the main point is that we want to be sure that we address these things somewhere in the business plan. And the last is promotion. What methods will you use? Will you have a budget? Um, is your marketing going to be strictly social media based for the first year? Most startups generally have a relatively small budget for marketing, and they want to take advantage of as much free marketing opportunities as they can. So if you're a startup, we probably want to talk about, the efficiencies that we're trying to build into our marketing, um, getting a big bang for just a few little bucks. How will you reach your target market? Now, again, that's something that we talked earlier about the target market, who they are. But when we're talking about our sales and marketing, it's we know who our target market is, but how are we going to reach them? What avenues are we going to use to get the information to them, to get them either to our physical location or on our website, or maybe they're just calling us on the phone. But either way, we need to address how we're going to get the word out to our target market that we have products and services that they likely want. Additionally, how will you convert your competitive advantage into sales? You know, you you always want to talk about what sets you apart from your competition. Um, but we need to also talk about how we're going to use that as a way to convert that advantage into sales. Whatever method it is that you're going to be using, we want to address it. And lastly, how will you measure success? Um, for startups, this is not exactly easy. The first 2 years, you just you're trying to stay open, you're trying to not lose money. And so, as I said earlier, for a lot of startups, simple survival and showing some profitability. I think if you get through the first 2 years doing that, you can consider yourself successful. Obviously, not every business has the same purpose or the same intention, but just generally speaking, I feel like if you do those two things, you're at least setting yourself up for future success. Again, funding requests. This is something you want to have towards the end of your business plan. And we want to talk about how much do you need, what will you use it for, provide quotes, estimates to substantiate the amount that you're requesting. This little chart that you're seeing here is a a little chart to put together sources and uses. Um, and we just want to make sure that the reader knows how much money we need and what we're going to use that money for. Um, they need to know that. They're going to want to know that, and you need to make sure that it's in the business plan for the reader to be able to access. Because, like I said, a lot of times the purpose of business plans are going to be funding related. And so, if that is the case, we need to specifically address what funds are needed and what they will be used on. Projections, if you're a startup, you know, these are really painting a picture of what we hope the first 2 or 3 years of the business is going to look like. Now, if you're an existing business, this is where you might put in your most recent profit and loss statement and balance sheet. But if you're a startup, you don't have that to go off of. You don't have those financial statements to put into your business plan. And so we have to replace those with projections or sales forecasts, whatever you want to call them. Now, I'm not going to go over, how you do projections in this lecture today. We've covered that in a different session. So if you need some help with that, you can go over to that video, and it's full of information about how to create projections and forecasts. But I do just want to talk about it a little bit briefly here, with regards to projections. If you're a startup, you want to project the profit and loss statement. If you don't know what a profit and loss statement is, that's something you need to get familiarized with. And again, that's something we've covered in a different video. So check that out if you feel like it will be beneficial. Um, but, you know, with regards to your projections, the first year you want to break down on a month-to-month basis and really show specific details. And then for years 2 and 3, we can just break those down on an annual basis. And over here on the right, you can see what a profit and loss statement would look like for ABC Company. This is just a very general um, profit and loss statement as an example for you guys. There's many examples online, and as I said, we've covered this in different videos. So if you need a refresher on profit and loss statements, please go over to that video and check it out. But overall, the purposes of these projections are to measure profitability, to track revenues and expenses, aid in decision making, supports financial planning and budgeting, evaluates business efficiency, helps in securing loans and investments, ensures tax compliance, and identifies trends and growth opportunities. So please, understand all of that and the importance of it. And be sure that you put a place for either your financial statements or your projections in your business plan. um, Again, I said we wanted to also provide a balance sheet. Over here on the right hand side, you can see the balance sheet for XYZ company. um, and again, this is a balance sheet of something we've covered in a different video, so check that video out if you need a refresher. But a balance sheet should be current for any existing businesses, or if you're doing a projected balance sheet as a startup, you want to project it for day one of your operations. And a balance sheet, the purpose of it is basically to provide a snapshot of financial health, to assess liquidity and solvency, to help in decision making, to support financial planning and budgeting, and evaluate debt management. It aids in securing loans and investments, and it also measures business growth over time. So this is where we would put our financial statements or our projections into our business plan. And the last section is our appendix. This is where we would put in any supporting documentation for our business plan. And that would include things like resumes, quotes, and estimates, copies of contracts for your services, any partnering or licensing agreements, leases or letters of intent, marketing materials, patent informations, etc. Just anything that would support the other areas of your business plan with further information or further documentation. You would put that in this section. And that is pretty much all we have in our business plan. Business plans are not difficult to put together, but again, they are a research exercise, and they're only going to be as good as the research that you put into them. So do yourself a favor, go the extra mile on the research. It's going to pay off in the end once your business plan is completed. So be sure to go the extra mile on that, and you'll have a much better product at the end because of it. And with that, we're going to go ahead and bring this session to a close. I thank you all so much for being here with us today in our business plan basics discussion. And we will see you next time on the Klein Fund Entrepreneurial Elevation Series. Thank you.